Time is a loop. From the early 80s to the late noughts, we saw video game aesthetics evolve from pixels on a black background to high-definition grand worlds, and with each generation of game consoles, a new aesthetic was born from it, one that was built from the limitations of the hardware and what games were popular at the time. But then, at the start of the early 2010s, we saw indie studios rise with games like Shovel Knight that purposely threw back to the visual aesthetics of the NES era. And since then, it's evolved once more, with SNES, Game Boy, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, and PS1 styled games reappearing on modern hardware. So now, the next logical step in this artistic retelling is the Sega Dreamcast, and VIVIDLope, an arcade puzzle game released earlier this year, is a title wrapped in that console's visual stylings. And I love it. VIVIDLope can be summed up as those tile puzzle games you find in the Game Boy Zelda titles, where you have to colour all the tiles in a room the same colour without treading over previous tiles, except taken to its logical extreme. Rather than small rooms, these tiles are floating in dreamscapes and take on a variety of shapes, even wrapping around itself and being positioned alongside all three axes. You can tackle these stages from all sides, and unlike the tile puzzles these are based on, there are several ways to complete them. This is thanks to a retread by the player, not necessarily leading to a failed puzzle. In this game you can retread over old tiles, but doing so will drain Cerise's stamina. Cerise being the beret-wearing bunny girl the player controls. Colouring new titles will cause Cerise's stamina to rise, but running across old tiles will lead it to dropping, and when it hits 0, the stage ends, the player gets a rank based on how many tiles they coloured, or they get a game over. While there is a minimum needed to be hit in order to pass the stage, once players hit that minimum, the game enters a bonus phase, where they have a chance to clear the rest of the level up to 100%. It's not easy though, as Cerise loses more stamina while in the bonus phase. Getting that 100% is part of the requirement to get the elusive V rank, and that shows the player mastered a level. But 100% isn't the only requirement. Keeping chains going for as long as possible and not losing a life also affect the player's final rank, and this can get really hard to manage, especially for the latter as Cerise has a lot of enemies out to get her. There are several enemy types, all bathed in the colour red, and they can do things from walking around menacingly to making a dive for the player's location. Or just be really long and annoying, and Cerise can't do a whole lot to stop them. Her base abilities just consist of walking and jumping. Thankfully for her and the player, the game is filled with a variety of items like a hammer or paint roller that can be used to both destroy enemies and colour in tiles. The latter can turn into a double-edged sword though, if the player ends up trapping themselves in a corner and can only get out by breaking their streak. So maybe best to leave items to emergencies and just go with the flow. After all, the flow in VIVIDLope is its most recurring feeling. This needs explaining. VIVIDLope is a game where you can easily get into the flow of playing it. You'll be filling out all the tiles and something unexpected might happen, or you might just get unlucky and restart. But in these situations, you'll just repeat the same path, the same turns at the same time, and just adapt the strategy when you get back to the moment of death. In some games, this would be frustrating, or this repetition, but something about the presentation of the game, both its visual style and music, can get the player easily lost in the game, and makes that repetition not seem so bad. And that loops this video back to the aesthetics of VIVIDLope. The best I can describe this game as is dreamy. From all the players and enemies being simple sprites designed to look like 3D objects, a very late 90s and early noughts visual style, to the abstract skybox backgrounds of each world, and of course the mega Dreamcast vibe the entire game has going on. Its menus remind me of Choo Choo Rocket, the scoring system like Sonic Adventure, and floating geometry like Wii Tricks. And while technically not on the Dreamcast, the level transitions give me Super Monkey Ball vibes, which is still a Sega game and it was developed for the Dreamcast originally, so it still counts. All of this creates a very nostalgic feeling, and the Dreamcast vibe isn't something I've seen from many indie games at this moment. Hopefully VIVIDLope marks the start of its return, and hopefully VIVIDLope can make its way to more systems than just PC. Right now it's available on Steam and itch.io, but I know it would be a brilliant game to have on the Switch. After all, I pretty much played this game exclusively on the Steam Deck with headphones in, and it was a treat. But don't wait till a potential console port is announced. Go out and grab VIVIDLope now. You won't regret it. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I actually wanted this out a lot earlier, but life priorities got in the way. I'm glad I could get it out now though. If you like what you've seen and heard in this video, go and give VIVIDLope a look. And if you have already done that, then let me know in the comments. A big thanks to all of our patrons for their support. The $5 plus tier are up on the screen right now. You can join them by following the link below. With that, don't forget to subscribe so that you always know to return to the source.